So part 4, I fear the ancient mariner. I fear thy skinny hand. So we are back to the wedding guest. There was a pause in the middle of the story at the end of part 3. Now Coleridge brings us back to the beginning of the actual scene, in fact, where the mariner has stopped the wedding guest and is telling him his tale. So now it is with the appearance of the ghost ship, with the description of the spectre women, and with his partners all dying around him. Naturally, the wedding guest, the poor wedding guest, is shaken badly. He is afraid. He's now even afraid of the ancient mariner, because indeed this man is telling him that all the sailors died right in front of him. So the wedding guest is maybe even suspecting that he also died, and now he's not the living person who's telling him his tale. Maybe he's also a spirit. So these are the fears that are aroused in the wedding guest, and this is why Coleridge brings us back, because he wants to tell us that as a listener, like you and I, we are also listeners. We are part of the wedding guest, so maybe we are also frightened. Maybe we are also wondering whether the ancient mariner is telling us the truth, whether he also died along with those sailors, and this is only his spirit, this is his ghost who is now narrating the story, who's roaming around and telling his tale. So we also wonder whether he's also dead. So these are some of the fears that he has. So he says, I fear the ancient mariner, I fear thy skinny hand, and thou art long and lank and brown, as is a ribbed sea sand. So he says, you are long and lank and brown. You have skinny hands. You are ancient looking. I am afraid of you. I fear thee and thy glittering eye. Again, see, he repeats it. I fear thee. But he says, I am most afraid of your glittering eyes. I mentioned in the very beginning that this part is significant, his glittering eye. The reason can be explained now. Is because that theme of imprisonment that I spoke of earlier on. His eyes have a glitter, a sparkle, because this is a light shining out. This is the light of his soul shining out. His soul which is imprisoned in his body. His soul is wishing and willing to be freed from the body. So this is why his guys have got a sparkle, have got an intensity, have got a power, because they really want to be freed of this burden of being alive, burden of living, burden of life. So he wants to be freed. And thy skinny hand so brown, fear not, thou wedding guest, this body dropped not down. So the ancient mariner now allays our fear also. He tells us we need not be afraid. He did not die. The ancient mariner did not die. So he is not a spirit, he's not a ghost, he's a living soul. And now comes the miserable part. He says, I did not die, but he's not happy. He's not happy that he didn't die, because as he explains his condition, he says, I was supposed to punish more. I was supposed to go through more misery. He tells us, alone, all alone on a wide, wide sea. You see the alliterations, the consonants, the assonants, all of them blended together here. The repetition of sounds, all, alone, all alone. Then own, he says, and then wide, wide sea. He's simply emphasizing his state. He was all alone. Now, loneliness is the worst form of punishment that he could get. He was suffering even before also. In this previous two parts, we saw that he suffered, but he did not suffer alone. He was suffering along with his shipmates. But now he's suffering alone. And he is the only single living soul as if the only living soul left on this world. There's no one else with him. So you can imagine his uh, his feeling. And never a saint took pity on my soul in agony. And he says, there was no one who took pity on me, because he had committed a sin. He was a sinner. So nobody, no saint, no Christian soul, he says, would ever take pity on me, would sympathize with me, because I had done a hellish thing. The many men so beautiful, and they all did lie, and 1,000 slimy things lived on, and so did I. So there are two things that are happening here. One, he says, all those people who were beautiful, all my shipmates who were beautiful men, I knew them, they were my friends, they are all lying dead before my eyes. And all these ugly, slimy creatures that are crawling upon the surface of the ocean, he says, and they are living on. So first thing is, he's still not learned his lesson. He's still not learned to respect all God's creatures. He's still not learned how to love all God's creatures. He's still not learned how to love nature, how to love the supernatural, the natural and the supernatural world, all the phenomena. He's not learned to respect or to love them, because they're all created by God. These slimy creatures, they may not be the real natural creatures, they may be supernatural, but he's still not being able to love them. He's this love has not gushed out of his heart. This is one thing. He's not learned his lesson. Second, in the last line, he compares himself with the ugly creatures. He says, as if I and them are one. These are ugly and slimy creatures. They are worthless, and I am like them. So they are living and I am living. So all the beauty has gone out of this world, and only the ugly creatures have been allowed to live. So he has not understood the weight of his own sin, even here. Those creatures may be ugly, but they are not sinful. He's committed a sin, but he compares them, himself to them. I looked upon the rotting sea and drew my eyes away. I looked upon the rotting deck, and there the dead men lay. So he doesn't have anywhere to look. He's all alone. He says, when I look towards the sea, I can't look at the sea. It's rotting, it is pungent, it gives off bad smell, there are ugly, slimy creatures. I can't look towards the sea. Then he says, I look at around my ship. I can't look around my ship, because then I see all the dead bodies. I look to heaven and try to pray. Then the third place is, he says, the skies. I look up, I look towards the heaven, and I try to pray. But or ever a prayer had gushed my heart as dry as dust. These lines are important, very important. He says, I can't even pray. I cannot pray. But ever a prayer had gushed my heart as dry as dust. So instead of praying as if he can only curse, he cannot pray as yet. At the thought of prayer, his heart turns as dry as dust. He says, I cannot pray. I closed my lids and kept them closed, and the balls like pulses beat. These are the balls of his eyes. Sometimes when we are very tired, we can even feel our eyeballs pulsing. So this is what he means. He says, because everything around me is difficult to look at. I can't look at the sea, I can't look around the ship, I can't look toward the sky, so I keep my eyes closed. I kept them closed, but the balls hurt. For the sky and the sea and the sky lay dead like a load on my weary eye, and the dead were at my feet. So you see, he says there's death, the weight of death upon him. The world around him is dead, because nothing moves, nothing changes. The people around him are dead. So he can feel, even when he closes his eyes, he says, I can feel the weight of the dead. This is why he keeps repeating the dead, the weight of the dead. So even when his eyes are closed, the weight of the dead he can feel. And he can't sleep. As a result of which, he cannot sleep. He can't repent, he cannot pray as yet because he has not learned to respect or love God's creatures, and he cannot sleep. This is part of the curse, part of his punishment. He is able to lie, he is made to lie awake eternally. The cold sweat melted from their limbs. Nor rot nor reek did they. The look with which they looked on me had never passed away. Now he's talking about the dead bodies. He cannot forget them, his sailors, because he brought about their death. He says, before my eyes their bodies melted. Before my eyes. The flesh started to melt. So it's been days that he was stuck there all alone. So the flesh of the bodies of the sailors starts to melt. See the horror that he's creating for you. The horrifying scenes that he's creating for you. Such is his powerful imagery. So, but the cold sweat that melted their flesh away, he says, it did not have any bad smell. It did not reek bad smell. They did not even rot. But significant thing is the look in their eyes. He says that never changed. The flesh on their bodies melted away without any smell, without rotting, but it just melted away. So maybe they were blessed. Maybe their souls had been blessed. They had they'd been redeemed. So because their flesh didn't rot like the rest of the world around them. But he says the look that they gave me never changed. So they always looked towards me with a blaming eye. So these dead bodies were lying there with their eyes open, staring at the ancient mariner. An orphan's curse would drag to hell a spirit from on high, but oh, more horrible than that is a curse in a dead man's eye. 7 days, 7 nights I saw that curse, and yet I could not die. An orphan's curse can even drag an angel to hell. He's comparing the orphan's curse with a curse in his sailor's eyes. And he says even, he reminds us that an orphan, because orphans don't have parents to look after them, so they are directly looked after, they are directly blessed by God. The Creator takes hold of their lives. So this is why in all religions we are asked to be kind to the orphans, because they don't have the parents in this world, but they do have a Creator who acts as a parent. So we have to be kind to them, because any act of unkindness towards them would mean an act of unkindness towards our Creator, because He is looking after them. So he says, if we are unkind to the orphan, and as a result of which he curses us, his curse can even drag a saint. Spirit on high means a spirit which ranks highly, an angel which ranks high in amongst God's angels, or a soul or a spirit who is blessed. And even that soul will be dragged out of the heights of paradise, or the angel from the higher ranks will be thrown into the hell if he is unkind to the orphan and an orphan has cursed him. Here the mariner feels that the curse in the sailor's eyes is even worse than the orphan's curse. So you see his misery. You see his misery. He feels that he is made to punish, made to live alive and made to go through all this. It's because of their curse now. First it was the albatross, but now combined to that sin is the curse of his shipmates. They have cursed him into this miserable life. They have cursed them into life and death. They have cursed him to live on while they themselves have moved on. And they have died, but their souls have moved on. So it is their curse that has still bound him, the ancient mariner, to this world. He says, 7 days, 7 nights, I saw that curse and yet I could not die. But he says, my fate was not to die. I wanted to die, I wished to die. And I would have died if I was not cursed, not to die. The moving moon went up the sky, and nowhere did abide, softly she was going up, and a star or two beside. So he lies awake all night, he looks towards the movement of the moon and the stars, he sees the stars and the moons rising in the sky. He cannot sleep. Her beams bemocked the sultry main, like April hoar frost spread. But where the ship's huge shadow lay, the charmed water burned alway a still and awful red. He says, at night, although the moonlight covered the whole ship deck, and the moonlight is now, he compares the moonlight here to the frost, to the frost that covers up all objects in the cold seasons. At dawn time, when we wake up, we find that all land is covered with frost. It is all white with frost. He says, so the moonlight has covered the ship deck and everything like the frost covers the grounds. But he says, except from where the ship's shadow lay, where there was the ship's shadow, moonlight could not reach. He says, and in the ship's shadow, the water burned in awful red. So see, he's carrying the guilt. The water has turned red, as if he is a murderer. He's murdered all these sailors, and he actually feels that he is their murderer. He's murdered them. He has killed them. He has brought about their death, and it is their blood has made the sea turn red. Beyond the shadow of the ship, again he says. Now, when again he says, when I look towards the shadow of the ship, I watched the water snakes. But he can see in those dark places the water snakes. They moved in tracks of shining white, and when they reared, the elfish light fell off in hoary flakes. He witnesses a beautiful scene after a long time. He sees snakes, he sees these slimy objects, but this time he does not use the word the slimy objects. He calls them by their name. He gives them respect. You see, there is a change. He's giving them respect. He calls them water snakes. He doesn't say those slimy, ugly creatures. He says, I watch the water snakes. So he sees these ugly, slimy creatures, namely the water snakes, and he sees them moving in tracks of shining white. So when they move through water, they leave behind a shining white trail. And as they move forward, he says, their light fell off in hoary flakes, as if it is, as if snow is falling. Within the shadow of the ship, I watched their rich attire. So the whole outlook is changed. The way of looking at nature has changed. He's not seeing as he used to see, but he's changed. He says, I now see the rich attire. He doesn't see, he doesn't talk about the lights in the same way as he talked about in the previous part, remember? Although he's seeing the same things, but now his heart is filled with love. His heart is able to repent now. So this is why he now sees the snakes instead of the slimy, ugly creatures, and he sees the rich attire instead of, he talks about a witch's oil burning in the ocean in the previous part. Blue, glossy green, and velvet black. So you see the snakes were of different colors, blue, green, and velvet black. They coiled and swam, and every track was a flash of golden fire. First he said it was elfish light, shining white light. Now he says Every track, whenever they moved, it was a flash of golden fire. So you, instead of seeing those the lights which depressed him, now he's seeing lights of golden and white flakes. Oh, happy living things. So, and now he feels calm, and he even feels at peace. He feels peace with nature. He feels part of nature. He feels part of the supernatural world. He has established a frequency with this world. He has now achieved a harmony with the world, which you can say. Because he says now they are happy in their own world, these creatures, they are happy. So, and he now envies their happiness. He envies their freedom, because he's not free. Remember the theme of imprisonment? He's still imprisoned. He's imprisoned in that ship. First he was imprisoned along with his shipmates, but then their term of imprisonment ended. Their souls were allowed to leave the ship. But his imprisonment, because he got the sentence of life in death, he got the life imprisonment, so he stayed back. He's continuing to he's continued to stay there as a prisoner, all by himself. So he envies them their freedom, their happiness, their beauty. He says, "No tongue their beauty might declare." First he had called them ugly and slimy, and he said, "Okay, all my beautiful friends are dead, and I am left alive along with these ugly creatures." But now they are not ugly. Now he calls them beautiful. "A spring of love gushed from my heart, and I blessed them unaware. Sure, my kind saint took pity on me, and I blessed them unaware." Twice he says that. He says, so love finally takes hold of his soul, love and respect for nature. Finally, he finds them in him. And because of this love, because of this respect, he is able to bless, he is able to pray. He is able to pray for these creatures, he is able to bless these creatures, and he is able to, as a result, cause blessing on his own self. The self-same moment I could pray, and from my neck so free, the albatross fell off and sank like lead into the sea. You see, now finally the burden is lifted. He was carrying the heavy burden of guilt, burden of sin, burden of guilt and sin of killing the albatross, guilt of murdering his shipmates, and the sin of causing deaths of so many people. So he was living with that weight, but he says now that weight is snatched away from my neck, but it is so heavy. He says that like lead it sank into the sea. Because remember that albatross that was hung around its body, it was a sign of guilt, his sin, and so many other things. So it is now lifted in this part. So in this part you see that theme of sin and redemption, the theme of sin and redemption, that is partly concluded, but we shall see that it is not firmly come to an end. It is further. It will, in fact, it will never be over for him. He is redeemed, but the ancient mariner is only partly redeemed because he lives on to tell his tale. So let's start with part 5 now and see what happens. What happens after he feels his soul is lightened. He feels that he can now pray and he can bless, and he feels that he has established a kind of harmony and a kind of positive relationship with the natural and the supernatural world. Oh, sleep. The first blessing is that he can sleep. Remember, I told you he could not sleep. Sleep was also taken away from him. It was a punishment that he couldn't sleep, but now he says he can sleep. So, oh sleep, it is a gentle thing, beloved from pole to pole. to Mary Queen the praise be given. She sent the gentle sleep from heaven that slid into my soul. Now he's reminded of Jesus Christ's mother, Mary. So he says now he has somebody's blessings with him now. Now the mother of Jesus Christ, who sends peace, calmness to the souls, as a result of which we can sleep and rest a while, and tensions and worries are taken away from her. He says, like a mother, she soothes me to sleep. So he's now a blessed soul. He can now sleep, and a saint can overlook him. The silly buckets on the deck that had so long remained, I dreamt that they were filled with dew, and when I awoke it rained. Second blessing is that of rain, that of water. Remember, for a long time they had remained without water. And now he says, when I went to sleep, in my dream he saw that the buckets which had long remained emptied on the deck of the ship, they were filled up with dew, and dew is a heavenly drink. So he sees that he's now a blessed soul. God has forgiven him, nature has forgiven him, the spiritual world has forgiven him, and is now showering him with blessings. First he can sleep, now he gets water, and when he wakes up he says it rains. Now rain is a sign of God's mercy in all religions, even in Christianity. So rain washes away sins. It washes away the sins of the body, and it also washes away the sins of the souls, and it is an act of baptism. In Christianity, baptism is important. The souls and the body and the soul is baptized. It is made pure by it is cleansed of all the sins, of all the impurities, by bathing and washing the body in water. So his physical body is washed by rainwater. The impurities and the dirt that is on his physical body, that's all washed away. But his soul is also, as he drinks from the rainwater, the soul is also washed clean. It's also made pure. It's also cleansed. My lips were wet, my throat was cold, my garments all were dank. Sure I had drunken in my dreams, and still my body drank. So he was so thirsty, he says, I started drinking in my dream, and when I woke up, he says I couldn't stop drinking. My body drank and drank and drank, and I was wet through and through. My lips, my throat, my clothes, everything was wet. I moved and could not feel my limbs. I was so light. This is the third blessing. He says he feels light now. First there was this albatross that hung around him like a heavy lead. Then upon his soul was this feeling of guilt, the burden of guilt. And then he was carrying the sin, the guilt of having murdered all his shipmates. So all of those guilts, all of those weights were lifted now, and he felt light. Almost I thought that I had died in sleep and was a blessed ghost. So he felt so light that he compares himself to a ghost. He says, I felt as light as a spirit, because a spirit does not have its body. It is our body that gives us weight, the limbs, the skeleton, and the flesh that gives its weight. The soul is light as a bird. So he says, I felt that I was as light as a blessed ghost. So he's happy now. He's happy because he's blessed, no more sinful. And soon I heard a roaring wind. This is a fourth gift. He says, I heard a roaring wind. Remember, he was stuck in the ocean as if in a painting, as if on a painted ocean, as Wordsworth says. So after a long time now, the wind starts to blow. So the natural and the supernatural worlds, both of which were cruel to him, now begin to be friendly towards him. Now they begin to shower him with their blessings. So we have the roaring wind. It did not come near, but with its sound it shook the sails, and that were so thin and sere. So because he had been there for a long time, there was no water, they were under the sun, so even the sails had become battered and tattered and thinned out. So the ship, in other words, the mariner tells us that the ship was not able to move. But now comes in the supernatural, the help from the new supernatural world. Now the ship will move on its own. Without the shipman, without the crewman, the ship will move. And this is how the natural and the supernatural world, both they conspire to help him, and they conspire to take him out of this imprisonment that he was in for such a long time. So his imprisonment, one form of his imprisonment is over, will be over here, because the ship which was imprisoned here and is now allowed to move. So he says he did not feel the wind. He could hear the wind somewhere afar, but he could hear it, his sound, and the sails shook. The upper air burst into life, and 100 fire flags sheen. To and fro they were hurried about, and to and fro and in and out the wan stars danced between. But he says, the upper air burst into life. Something was happening around him. He doesn't know what is going on, but he can feel that there is movement around him. The air is no longer still. The clouds are shifting. The air is blowing. And to and fro, he says, that the fire flags sheen, meaning he could as the ship moved, the stars drifted in and out of the clouds. And the coming wind did roar more loud, and the sails did sigh like sedge. And he says, as I felt the wind approaching near me, the louder and louder the voice grew, and the sails also started to blow, and the rain poured down from one black cloud. The moon was at its edge. So it's strange again, strange phenomena all around him. The wind is roaring, the sails are moving now. It is raining from a dark cloud, but at the same time there is moon at the edge of the cloud. The thick black cloud was cleft, and still the moon was at its side. So, sign of mercy. These are no more black lights. He's not left alone anymore now. He's not being punished anymore. Like waters shot from some high crag, the lightning fell with never a jag, a river steep and wide. So he says, he's describing to you, he uses through a simile, he describes how the thick black cloud was cleft. Cleavage is a kind of a crack, it's a kind of a gap. So he says the black cloud was cleaved in the middle, but the moon still shone. And how did it? Moon has said, like waters shot from some high. So like water coming out of a hole, of a gap in the rocks, like a waterfall. And in the same way, the lightning fell with never a jag, a river steep and wide. So from that gap in the clouds, the lightning shone. So the black cloud shone with lightning, and the lightning is compared to the water gushing out of a gap in the mountain rocks. The loud wind never reached the ship, yet now the ship moved on. So like as I was telling you, the wind never actually reached him. He never felt it. He heard it, but the ship moves on. Beneath the lightning and the moon, the dead men gave a groan. Now the supernatural world comes into being. The ship is moving, but it needs people to steer him on, but it needs hands to give it direction, to take him safely back to the shore. So now the supernatural world will come in and help the ancient mariner. So he says, as the lightning struck and the moon shone bright, the dead men started coming to life. They groaned, they stirred, they all uprose. They nor spake nor moved their eyes. It had been strange even in a dream to have seen those dead men rise. Although he creates again images of horror for us, but we know that this horror is accompanied with blessing. So as those dead bodies, they stood up, groaning, they did not speak anything. They did not even move their eyes, because these are only bodies that had been brought back to life to help the ancient mariner. So it was very strange to look at them. They had not been given back their lives, but they have been temporarily made to help the ancient mariner, made to take him safely to the shore. So he says, but for him it was a strange sight. He says, even in a dream to have seen those dead men rise. If in a dream, even if in a dream I had seen them, dead bodies, to rise up like this, I would have been scared. So he says, I was scared when I saw the scene. The helmsmen, and the strange thing is that they all went to work without the mariner telling them what to do. They all, as if they are all being guided by some supernatural power, by some supernatural spirit, they all went about their works. The helmsman, the one who steers the ship, he went to his position. The ship moved on, yet never a breeze up blew. So he says, the ship moves on, but they couldn't feel the breeze. The mariners all again worked the ropes. The sailors are working on the ropes where they were wont to go do. So wherever they were needed, whatever they were needed to do, they did it. They raised their limbs like lifeless tools. We were a ghastly crew. So he says, as we worked around in the ship, we appeared to be a ghastly crew. We appeared to be the crew of the dead and not the crew of the living. And they even worked as if their bodies were working as if they were without body. So they were actually, the dead bodies were working, and they were actually lifeless. The body of my brother's son stood by me, knee to knee. The body and I pulled at one rope, but he said not to me. So he tells us of his own experience. He says, my brother's son, he stood next to me, and he pulled at the same rope with me, but he said not a single word to me, because naturally he was not alive in the sense that we can call someone alive. Now at this description, the wedding guest is again frightened. He says, I fear the ancient mariner. Be calm, thou wedding guest. But the ancient mariner does not listen to him. He says, stay calm. It was not those souls that fled in pain, which to their courses came again, but a troop of spirits blessed. Now he tells us of a strange thing. He says, stay calm. There is nothing to be afraid of. It is not those. He says, in these bodies, their own souls were not returned. So the spirits of my shipmates have not returned, have not been returned to these bodies. He says, but these bodies have been taken over by some blessed spirits, by some pure Christian spirits who have come to help me. For when it dawned, they dropped their arms. So what happens? All night, these spirits which had entered the bodies of these sailors, they worked all night. And at dawn time, what did they do? They dropped their arms, clustered round the mast. Sweet sounds rose slowly through their mouths and from their bodies passed. So at dawn time, when the night is disappearing, they all gather around the mast, the pole which is at the center of the ship and steers it, in fact balances it. They stood around it and they all started singing. They started singing beautifully. Around and around flew each sweet sound, then darted to the sun. Slowly the sounds came back again, now mixed, now one by one. So you see, they are all singing in harmony with nature. They are giving a message to the ancient mariner. They're showing him that they are part of this natural world. They are part of the whole universe. And we are all part of the universe. We are all one. Because he says their sweet sound, it flew around and around the ship and up and above. It went towards the sun, then came back from there, and sometimes mixed as if the whole universe was singing, sometimes one by one. So it was as if the whole world was singing with them. So the whole universe was in harmony. Sometimes a dropping from the sky, I heard the skylark sing. So you see, further blessing. He says, sometimes, as if I heard them sing like a skylark sings beautifully, or I heard the sound of the skylark mixed with their sounds, mixed with their singing. And sometimes all little birds that are, how they seem to fill the sea and air with their sweet jargoning. And sometimes when they sang together, they sang like all sweet birds of the sea and the air that fill up all the sky and fill up the natural surrounding with a sweet sound. That was how they all sang. But through these similes, he's trying to show us how in harmony with the natural world these spirits were. The supernatural world is one with the natural world. These spirits were part of the supernatural world. They are also part of the natural world because they are singing along with the birds and all the natural objects of nature. And then he says, and now it was like all instruments, now like a lonely flute, and now it is an angel song that makes the heavens be mute. And then sometimes he says it was all instruments, as if in the song all instruments were used. Sometimes they sang like a lonely flute, like a single instrument was being played. And now it is an angel song that makes the heavens be mute. So he is totally overcome by the beauty of the song, by the beauty of it all, by the beautiful effect of the harmony that has been created. He's overawed by it, he's mesmerized by it, he's hypnotized by it, and he's so impressed by it that he hears different musical instruments playing, he hears different birds singing, he hears all voices being mixed up. So he sometimes hears a solo performance, he sometimes hears a joint performance. So he sometimes hears spirit singing, sometimes the angel singing, sometimes a heavenly song, sometimes a natural song. So, but the message is all is one. It's all one. In this universe, it's one spirit that pervades, and everything is in harmony. So, and we have to respect every object of this universe and every nature. It ceased. So eventually this singing, this beautiful effect, it eventually came to an end. Yet still the sails made on a pleasant noise till noon, a noise like of a hidden brook in the leafy month of June, that to the sleeping woods all night singeth a quiet tune. He says their singing stopped, but still he says the sails made on a pleasant noise till noon, but the sounds reverberated through the sails. Till noontime they sang, the songs, the sounds reverberated. A noise, now he's comparing the sound, the song through a brook, to the fresh water flowing in a leafy month of June. He says, because in the season of June, the brooks, the streams are full. Snows on the mountain have melted, and the fresh cold water fills up the streams, the freshwater streams, and the water as it passes, it has its own music, that to the sleeping woods all night singeth a quiet tune. So it says their noise, the noise of the sails was like the sweet music of the fresh water streams, which lay awake at night on the woods. Till noon we quietly sailed on, yet never a breeze did breathe. Then he says, it was till noon we sailed on, but still no sign of wind. So the supernatural, this is supernatural in fact. Slowly and smoothly went the ship, moved onward from beneath. Maybe a hint here, remember the sailors, superstitious sailors had at one time wondered that maybe they are being punished by a spirit that had followed them 9 fathom deep from the land of the mist. So here also he says that smoothly went the ship, but it was not being moved from something in the air because there was no wind, but moved onward, he says, from beneath. So as if a spirit was moving the ship from under the depths of the ocean. This is the supernatural world helping the ancient mariner now. Under the keel 9 fathom deep, from the land of mist and snow, the spirit slid. And it was he that made the ship to go. The sails at noon left off their tune, and the ship stood still also. So see, so that view is confirmed now. He says, under the keel, the line at the bottom of the ship that gives it balance, he says, under the ship and in the depths of the ocean, the spirit that had followed them, the spirit that once had followed them to take revenge, to punish them for their sins, had now become their friend, had now was now kind to them in fact, and it was helping take the ancient mariner back home safely. But then the mariner tells us that the sails at noon left off their tune. So the sails which were flapping on their own, although there was no wind, but they were flapping as if under the effect of the wind, they left off their tune, meaning they stopped flapping, they stopped giving off that sound and music, and the ship stood still also, and the ship also came to a standstill. The sun right above the mast had fixed her to the ocean. Now once again the ship has reached the equator. Remember, the equator is the point of change, and it is every time the ship reaches the equator, the sun is right above the mast, is right above their heads. So now the sun again fixes her to the ocean. The ship stops, but in a moment she began stir with a short uneasy motion. So if the mariner had wondered that it was a short, brief, friendly spell and it was over now because the ship had stopped, his fears were allayed, because the ship in a minute it begins to move again. But he says with an uneasy motion, backwards and forwards half her length with a short uneasy motion. So it was now moving in uneasy motions, sometimes backwards, going forwards, not sure where to go. Then like a pawning horse let go, she made a sudden bound. It flung the blood into my head and I fell down in a swoon. So first it tacked, went forward and backward, slowly, not sure where to go. But then he says, like a pawning horse, like a horse which has been, on which you have placed a bet, who's ready for a race. When the call is given, he rushes forward. He says, in the same way the ship rushed forward and it made a sudden bound, a sudden movement. It flung the blood into my head, and the result was, the mariner says, that the sudden movement jerked me and I fell down. I felt dizzy and fell down. How long in that same fit I lay, I have not to declare. But ere my living life returned, I heard and in my soul discerned 2 voices in the air. He says, I fell down and I don't know how long I stayed like that. He fell down and maybe he was dazed for the time being. And in that state of mind, he says, ere my living life return, before, means before. So he says, before I came to my consciousness, he has lost consciousness, and he says, before I gained my consciousness, before I came back to my senses, he says, in his dreams he heard two voices talking to each other. So he's once again having a dream, and he hears two voices speaking to each other. Is it he, quoth one, is this the man, by him who died on cross, with his cruel bow he laid full low the harmless albatross? This is the first voice. So these two voices, again the supernatural phenomena, these two voices are talking about the ancient mariner. They are discussing his fate. They're discussing what to do with him next. So as it will be revealed to you. So the first voice says, is he not the same person who had killed the harmless albatross, who had killed a harmless creature of God? The spirit who biddeth by himself in the land of mist and snow? He loved the bird that loved the man who shot him with his bow. He says, the spirit who lives in the land of mists and snow. He loved the bird that loved the man. So he loves that man who loves the bird also. Okay, so, but that man, he says, he shot that bird with his bow. So the spirit, that pure spirit, the spirit of, that was in the albatross, that was killed by this man. The other was a softer voice. So the first voice was accusing and accusing voice. It was reminding mariner of his crime. The other was a softer voice, a gentler voice, soft as a honeydew. And he said, the man had penance done, and penance more will do. It was gentle. It says he has paid for his crime, he has paid for his sins, he has done his penance. But he says his penance is not over. He will give more. More will do. With this part, we come to the end. With this, we come to the end of the part. And as you have seen, this part has not properly concluded. The ancient mariner has become unconscious. The ship is moving fast. He's lying in his ship unconscious, and he goes into a state of mind where he hears two voices talking to. He cannot see them, but he hears voices talking to each other, and they're talking about him. They're talking about his fate, but their discussion is not complete. We are left off in the middle here. But what we know is that the one is the voice which is the accusing voice. One is accusing him, one is reminding him of his crimes, one is revengeful, the other is the softer and the calmer voice and the gentler voice. That is the voice of understanding, and that is a voice of the loving nature, which has seen and forgiven the ancient mariner for his sin and for his crime because of the punishment that he's undergone, and is now bent on forgiveness. So he's forgiven partly because he says, the man hath penance done, and penance more will do. So he's paid half of his paid half for his crime, but he has more to pay. So the discussion will go on in the next part, and that I will take up in the next lecture. So we close this lecture with the with an understanding that the tale that the ancient mariner is telling us, that is now, it is now going towards its conclusion. It's now going towards its end, because we see that we have gone through that horrible portion in which the ancient mariner, along with his crew members, was severely punished by the natural and the supernatural world. But then in the after the punishment, we also see how the natural and the supernatural worlds both show kindness to the ancient mariner, and both show forgiveness, both show compassion towards him and forgive him for his sin, and are now helping him to get back safely to land, back to his home, and to take this experience with him and to tell it to the rest of the world, and to teach them a lesson, to teach them a moral, and to teach them about harmony, unity, love, compassion, mercy for all nature, for all God's creatures. So as you can see, that message has almost developed.